Hola, bienvenidos. Welcome, everybody. Before we start, I want to give a congratulations to, where's Ana Martinez? Where's Ana? Winner of Social Bingo right here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. If you did not get, there's still plantains. If you did not get pupusas, there's pizzas on the way. So there'll be more food coming if you didn't get any. I want to start us off by, we're going to hear a lot of perspectives tonight from students, from parents, from teachers, about the importance of Latinx educators in their life. So we're going to start off with EmpowerEd's Ward 1 Teacher Fellow, Isabela Sanchez Pimienta.
Welcome to everybody who's here today. Teachers, parents, educators, administrators, I am thrilled to be here, and I am thrilled that you took the time on a rainy Monday to be here as well. I am Isabela Sanchez Pimienta. I am a 4th grade math and literacy teacher at an elementary school in Ward 1. I'm also here as an EmpowerEd Ward 1 fellow. In this role, I am focused on an issue that is not only very dear to my heart, as a former Latinx student and a current Latinx teacher, but also an issue that has gotten a lot less attention in the policy and advocacy world. That is the recruitment and retention of our Latinx educators. And I am very excited that our teacher diversity advocacy group chose to zoom in on this topic that does not get as much attention as we think that it deserves. Tonight, we will make a joint effort in bringing together our collective experiences, expertise, and all the varied perspectives in the room to understand from the report and from each other why the sizable representation gap between Latinx students and Latinx teachers in the district should matter to us, and also how it matters to students every day. Our hope is that by the end of our time together, we leave with a very clear understanding of the problem and with tangible action steps that will further this cause. Overall, DC schools serve a 19% Latinx student population, but employ a teaching staff that is only 7% Latinx. While these numbers represent a 12% representation gap, they are an average that masks the huge disparities that exist in the wards that serve the highest population of Latinx students. These are wards 1 and wards 4. In Ward 4, there's a 30% representation gap between Latinx students and teachers. In Ward 1, this gap climbs to 43%. At the school where I teach, a Title I school in Ward 1, we can really appreciate just how much averages can actually mask. Out of the 426 fantastic students that we serve, 52% are Latinx, 42% are English language learners, nearly all of whom are native Spanish speakers, but just 3 teachers, including me, that translate to 5% of all teachers, are Latinx. And that is the highest that this number has been since I started being a teacher at this school 4 years ago. And while the staff members where I teach represent an incredible variety of experiences and incredibly strong commitments to all students, as countless studies have shown, students of color perform better academically and feel more cared for when they are taught by adults who reflect their race and ethnicity. These benefits also extend to improved academic perceptions and attitudes towards students of color, as well as improved college-going rates. Tonight, we'll get to hear from Latinx teachers, students, and parents from across the district who will put a face to what these numbers really mean, and why this issue not only matters to them, but also why it should matter to all of us. Our hope is that as we analyze the report that will anchor our conversations, we will have a shared understanding of the problems related to the recruitment and retention of our Latinx educators in the district, that will discuss what these findings mean for us, and decide how we can leverage our roles to implement the recommendations that we are proposing. Nothing reminds me more of why this is a cause worth advocating for than when a Latinx student or parent confides in me to share some of their most personal experiences that force me to advocate on their behalf. whether that be giving them accurate information about their rights when faced with ICE, or voicing their concerns to my administration when they do not feel comfortable doing so themselves, or simply providing them with the information on how to access mental health services in the district. In many cases, I was the only person that these students and families felt comfortable sharing these critical experiences with. And I shudder at the thought that they may have never had anybody to tell them to if I hadn't been there. Whether that be because I spoke their language, I look like them, or because we have faced similar experiences. I was grateful that they trusted me. But I am constantly wondering how many stories our Latinx students and their families would be empowered to tell if there were more Latinx teachers to tell them to. As an education community in DC, we should care about uplifting everyone's voice in an equitable way. And from my experience as a Latinx student in public school and as a teacher in DC public schools, I believe that one way to uplift the voices of our Latinx students and families is to uplift our Latinx educators. I hope that we can leave here today with a clear understanding of the impact that a lack of Latinx teacher representation can have on the lives of the students we all care about so much, and that we leave with clear next steps to tackle this issue. I am confident that our conversations today will launch us into a movement that will make sure all students' voices are heard, that they feel valued and cared for, and that they are given the opportunities to achieve even their loftiest goals and dreams. And now, here to really kick off our town hall, it is my pleasure to introduce our host and the exceptional and proud Latinx leader of Bancroft Elementary School, Jessica Morales.
Muchas gracias y bienvenidos nuevamente a nuestra escuela. I'm probably you'll probably hate me because I'm simultaneous, but it looks like go back and forth between English and Spanish. So, yo lo voy a hacer en español y lo voy a hacer en inglés a la misma vez, o primero en español y luego en inglés. Yo soy Jessica Morales, soy la directora aquí de Bancroft Elementary. Soy una chica que nació aquí en Washington, D.C. Fui a Oyster muy pequeña, me gradué de Oyster, entonces la única educación que yo conozco es la educación bilingüe, ¿no? Y entonces, para mí esta noche es muy importante. Tenemos el placer de tener a EmpowerEd con nosotros en nuestra casa para seguir apoyando y elevando la voz de nuestra gente, ¿no? De nuestros educadores aquí en Washington, D.C. Es súper importante que todos, y me refiero a todos, las familias, los alumnos, los educadores, que todos trabajemos juntos y podamos abogar para nuestros niños. En nuestra escuela nosotros recibimos con brazos abiertos a más de 620 alumnos todos los días, y muchos de los cuales vienen de hogares muy humildes y hogares latinos. Somos una escuela bilingüe, o sea, nuestros niños reciben instrucción en español y en inglés, mitad del día en inglés, mitad del día en español, matemáticas exclusivamente en español. Y somos una escuela Title I, que quiere decir que más del 40% de nuestros alumnos reciben comida gratis o a precio reducido, ¿no? Y para nosotros este tipo de foro que tenemos acá es extremadamente importante porque, como dijo la chica anterior de mí, somos muy pocos que somos Latinx y somos educadores. Como directora, yo les puedo contar tal vez en menos de 2 manos cuántos líderes de Latinx hay aquí en Washington, D.C. Y entonces es importante que nosotros tengamos este tipo de foro para entender cuál es el reto. No me gusta decir problema, pero sí hay un reto y tenemos que encontrar las soluciones para esos retos. Entonces estoy muy agradecida de que esté aquí EmpowerEd con nosotros y podamos colaborar y encontrar alguna solución. Really quickly in English, my name is Jessica Morales. I am the principal here at Bancroft Elementary. I was born and raised here in DC. I'm a simultaneous bilingual, meaning I learned English and Spanish at the same time. So I go back and forth between languages. I went to Oyster Elementary when I was little, so all I know is dual language. So I am a product of dual language programs. And for me, it's really important to have EmpowerEd here tonight with us because it's up to us to elevate the voices of the unheard, right? And it's the educators that make that difference. It's important for us, all of us, and when I mean all of us, I mean families, students, and educators to work together to find a solution to the challenges that we face as Latinx educators. At our school, we serve more than 620 students, and every day we receive them with open arms and smiles. And we are a Title I school, meaning that more than 40% of our families qualify for reduced premiums. So we face a lot of challenges. But for us, for me, it's particularly important to have EmpowerEd here tonight because we are those advocates for our children. We are proof that we can raise our children as Latinx members of this community, and that's what we're here to do. I don't like to call it problems, I like to call them challenges, and we need to figure out a solution to make sure that we empower more Latinx generations to become educators. So with that said, welcome to our school, bienvenidos a nuestra escuela. Really quick, los baños para los que no estuvieron aquí temprano, van a usar los baños aquí a mano derecha, hay baños para los adultos, solo salen por esa puerta. The bathrooms for adults are on the right side, just make your way over there if you need me. If you need me, I'll be hanging around, ask me any questions, but now I'm passing it along. Bienvenidos.
Thank you. So now we're going to hear from the voice of the people we are here to support. We're going to hear from a student at Roosevelt High School about the importance of Latina educators in her life, Rosa Martinez.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rosa Martinez. I'm from El Salvador. I have been a student at Roosevelt for the last 4 years. Since moved to the United States, I'm come here for many reasons. Gangs, violence, and some family problems. Are two of the reasons. I'm come to the United States when I was 15 years old, and my brother was 12 years old. One of my best inspirations is my mother and my father. I know they see me from the sky, and they are proud of me. Another inspiration also is my teacher, Sonia Rodriguez. Ms. Rodriguez is my science teacher at Roosevelt Senior High School. Why is my inspiration? It's because she's a very strong Latina woman. When I need help, she always helps me. She helps everyone in the school. Some students in Roosevelt don't speak English, and she explains the class in both languages, Spanish and English. For example, when I don't understand something or another class, I go into her room and sit with her, and she's like explaining in many billion sides, and she's like, muchacha, ponte pilas. And it's important to have a Latino teacher in this school because many students coming from our countries and do not speak English and don't feel comfortable. But if we have someone to talk, it is more easy to be comfortable and also share cultures, traditions. It's more easy also to make friends. It's important to things because we know this person is like you, inspired to grow up, like go to the college, also Latino teachers, more than teacher is a friend. You can talk to them if you have any problem, if you feel like sad when you don't have friends, or sometimes when you come from our country, you feel like you cannot talk to anybody. If your fair class is in Spanish or a Spanish teacher, you can talk to them, you can feel more comfortable. That's why I feel My Miss Rodriguez is more than my teacher, is my counselor, and my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. We're going to hear from one more student who attends Next Step Public Charter School, is an alumni of Next Step Public Charter School, Edgar Zapata. Round of applause.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Edgar Zavala Rivera, and I'm from El Salvador. I'm a student from the UDC Community College. And it is very important to have Latino teachers because Latino teachers know our culture and understand Latino students better. Latino teachers know our language and are able to teach and communicate with us better. Latino teachers understand and how we relate to each other and our social interactions. Latino teachers know and understand the obstacles that immigrant students to face every day, like English language. It is easier to relate to a Latino teacher. How they impact me? I learn better because I feel comfortable with the Latino teachers. I was able to get my GED thanks to the help and guidance of my Latino teachers. When I had a problem, I was more comfortable talking to my Latino teachers. Having educated and competent Latino teachers teach Latino students to help us to feel like back home, we feel safer, and we feel more comfortable, and we learn better. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
And now we're going to hear from the perspective of a parent about why Latino teachers matter so much in the lives for their own students. And we're going to hear from Diana Delgado, a parent of students at Bruce Monroe.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Diana Delgado. I am originally from Puerto Rico. I have 3 kids who go to Bruce Monroe Elementary. So for me, having Latino teachers for my kids have been a blessing because they are not only learning how to read, how to write, the numbers, but they are learning culture, tradition, and other things that only a Latino teacher can teach to the kids. And when a kid is exposed to, here in the United States, a kid that comes from a Latino country, it is so important for them to keep practicing, keep working on Spanish language because otherwise they're going to forget, they're going to lose it. And also for a kid that comes from, United States or a country that native language is English or other, it's better for them to learn the second language because it's, when they are little, so it's better to learn, a second language and they don't have to struggle when they grew up. So it's better for them also to be exposed to a Latin, leader because they are going to embrace diversity. They are going to embrace other cultures. They are going to break the stigma that in order to achieve success, you have to be part of a certain group. So they can see a Latino like a great leader, and they can also see that it doesn't matter the race, the language, the country that you come from. If you put effort into it, you can reach your goals. So personally, when I came from my home country to this country 3 years ago, that was my priority for my kids. I wanted to find a bilingual school for my kids because I know that otherwise they now I can see how they are learning about culture, tradition, and they are learning about their roots. Even though we are not in our home country, I can see that they are getting that sense of belonging. So yeah, it's the better thing that can ever happen to them, because I feel like they are having a family extended here in the United States in his education. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to hear from one more person, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the report and get to the most important part of our evening, which is discussions with all of you about this topic and the challenges that all of you have experienced in your own lives, in your own roles, and what we can do together to solve it. So before we get to that part, I want to introduce Brent Elliott, who's the Chief of School Improvements and Support with DC Public Schools.
Good evening. My name is Brent Elliott, and I currently serve as the Chief of School Improvement and Supports for DC Public Schools. And it's my honor to bring you greetings on behalf of Chancellor Louis Farabee and our Deputy Chancellor, Melissa Kim. The Talent Development Division is one of the teams in my office, and it is through this team that we lead the district's strategic efforts to get, grow, and keep our top talent. Over the last 10 years, we have seen our Latinx teaching force triple, but we know that is not enough. In a district with a significant population of Hispanic students and English language learners, we know that representation matters. And we are working hard to increase the diversity of our teaching force, as well as the presence of Latinx leaders in our school system. We are doing this through a number of ways, including targeted outreach to states and abroad that have large populations of Latinx teachers. We also are implementing a new program that allows us to focus on building a pipeline of Latinx leaders in our school district. Throughout the evening, you will have an opportunity to learn some of the other ways that we are accomplishing these goals, but we cannot do this without you. And that's why events like this are so important. Thank you for being here and the opportunity for us to think and act together.
All right, thank you everyone. I'm going to spend just a few minutes going through the highlights of our report and talking to you about what we found as we began to prioritize this critical issue of recruiting, supporting, and retaining more Latinx teachers. Before I do that, I want to do a few thank yous. First of all, in the back, Victoria Fiesel and Martin Moreno, if you guys can wave your hands back there. These guys are, all back here are authors of our report. So they were all contributors and the original authors to our report today. If you haven't gotten it, it is available in English and in Spanish up at the front over there. I want to thank Deputy Mayor for Education Paul Kine and the Deputy Mayor's Office here tonight, who has prioritized strengthening the teacher pipeline and been a strong supporter of teacher voice. I want to thank DCPS and their recruitment team and their equity team for their investment in this work. I want to thank and acknowledge State Board of Education Rep. Emily Gasoy from Ward 1, who is here. And some of our partners. Our goal is that tonight is really just a kickoff of a campaign to recruit, support, and retain Latinx teachers that will stretch over years until we really have the true representation in our Latinx teacher force of our students in this city. And so we are forming a coalition of organizations to take this on, and I want to thank Many Languages, One Voice, who is here, Teaching for Change, the DC Language Immersion Project, CENAIS, the Centro de Alfabetización en Español, the DC Afro-Latino Caucus, the Latin American Youth Center, and many more who are partners in this effort that we are starting tonight. I also want to thank, we have a lot, I can't name them all by name, but we have a lot of school principals here tonight, so thank you very much to all the principals that have attended and for your voices in this conversation. And if all of our teacher fellows can raise your hand, You're going to be meeting all these folks in a second, and these guys are going to lead some of our conversations. So I want to thank everyone who has gotten involved in this effort so far. I want to start with something they highlighted before, which is even though we are increasing our Latinx teaching force, we have a long way to go to make sure our representation is equal. So 19% of our students in DC are Latinx across public and public charter schools, but only 7% of our educators. The next thing is, that is really stark in two particular wards. We're in Ward 1 right now, where 58% of our students are Latinx, 15% of our educators, and a similar gap in Ward 4. So in the parts of the city where we have a growing Latino population, it's really important for us to increase that representation. For all the reasons you heard about from our students and what those educators can lend both personally and academically to their lives. It matters because we know our students need windows and mirrors, and it's not only that we need Latino teachers for our Latino and Latino students, it is that our other students need that window and need that exposure to other cultures, that exposure to other languages. So our students need both the representation and people who represent difference from them so they can learn from their educators. Role models, obviously, that they serve in their life, and the cultural representation, the language access, which we know is so important to so many of them. And then, academic achievement. We just know factually, right, that our students, especially students who have teachers of color in the early grades, are less likely to drop out and far more likely to graduate from high school. So it's incredibly important that they have that representation and they gain that investment in school because they're taught about how much it matters by people who can share their experiences in life. We heard in this report from a lot of students who talked about how it makes them feel comfortable, that they understand the things that they're going through. And it helps, I thought it was really interesting that one of the students talked about, it helps them understand and respect their non-Latinx peers, right? So that perspective of having Latinx educators helps kind of as a liaison, as a cultural translator in some ways to better their relationships with other students in their class. And parent engagement. So many of the students we interviewed said directly, my mom couldn't communicate, right, if we didn't have a Latino teacher to communicate with, or someone who was bilingual or Hispanic, someone who could speak the language. We'll talk about that parent communication in a little bit. But it is challenging to recruit these teachers. First of all, we know both Black and Latino graduation rates are not where they should be, right, in terms of parity with white students. Many students of color graduate from high school with a much larger debt, a college debt, than do their white counterparts, which means coming out of school, they need a job that pays really well. And so for a Black teacher, for a Latino teacher to be able to take that career on, they need that guarantee that they're going to be able to pay off debts that are much higher often than white recruits. Starting salaries in DC schools. So DCPS is among the highest in the country in overall salary, although we live in a very expensive city. So when you account for that, it's still a challenge even for our DCPS teachers. In the charter sector, there are 35 schools whose starting salary is below a livable wage to afford a studio apartment in DC. So salaries still matter, even though DCPS is ahead of many places in this. It still matters to make sure many of those charter schools have very large populations of Latino students, and they need those bilingual and Latinx educators. College faculty and education is not always representative of the students they're teaching. Culturally responsive curriculum, many students can feel disaffected or even drop out, right? If that curriculum that they're learning in school is so different from their own experience and they don't see themselves reflected. And then the tests that you have to take to become a teacher, like the praxis exam, there are language barriers, there is cultural bias in the tests themselves, which some studies have shown, and so we talk about that in the report and how we can make changes there. Teacher preparation. So we just know that people who get clinical preparation, meaning they teach while they're preparing, are much more likely to stay in the profession. So if you come through an alternative preparation program, some of them have clinical experience where you're in the classroom, where you have a mentor teacher, some of them don't. And people who have a mentor teacher, more likely those clinical experiences, like going through a traditional university program, tend to pair people with a fellow teacher of color. And that can be really empowering in terms of seeing themselves stay in a career for the long run. Comprehensive preparation is about getting that clinical practice, and we've seen in data that teachers of color often prefer residency programs where they learn from a mentor teacher. So the educator experience, you've heard a little bit about this already, but how they can be culturally responsive, and I would just highlight one more thing that's here, which is someone to advocate for them, right? Someone who they know understands them and will have their back when they fight against a system that can also be institutionally racist, both against our Black and Latino and other students of color. The Latinx teacher tax. So I want to go back to what we said earlier, which is if you are one of, Isabella talked about it, H.D. Cook being one of four, was it? Three Latina teachers in her school. So if you are one of four people, potentially, maybe there's a couple other people who speak Spanish, if you are only one of 5 or 6 or 7 people who can speak Spanish in a large school environment, think how often that school is asking you to translate. Think about how often that school is asking you to translate at the assemblies, to do the parent communication that's not part of your student's caseload, to translate a document, to host an event. So there's additional responsibilities that get put on our Latino and Latina teachers and our Hispanic and bilingual teachers because of their abilities. And over time, that takes a toll, right? They're doing a lot of additional responsibilities that are not part of their salary, they're not part of their job responsibilities, and that's part of the reason we can lose those teachers. We also talked to 5 different principals in DC for the report, and we heard how crucial it is for them to recruit and retain Latinx, Hispanic, and bilingual educators. They talked to us about the diversity of the pool itself, whether they have enough people in the pool of eligible teacher candidates who are Latinx. They also said, and this is something we hear all the time, it's not just teachers. We need social workers and counselors and school psychologists who can speak both languages and have that cultural competency as well. And one of the things they talked about doing was including Latinx members of their community in the hiring process and engaging staff in real race and equity work. So from the policymaker perspective, the most promising thing about this to me is there is agreement, right? This is not a really contentious issue. There's broad agreement that this is a problem, that we're making some progress, but we have way more to do to get it right. And so when we talk to policymakers, whether that was members of the state board, the city council, the deputy mayor, what we heard was a consensus that we do want to take this on, and we agree on some of the things that have to be done. We just need a communicated strategy. And one of the main things we heard from almost everyone is there just isn't the Latinx representation in policymaking for this to become the priority it needs to become. Do we have senior leaders in DCPS in the charter sector, in the deputy mayor's office, in the state board? So we have no elected city council members who are Latino, no members of the State Board of Education who are Latino. So think about whether our elected representatives are going to prioritize this issue, right, if it has not been personal to them. And so getting people in elected office and policy positions who are themselves Latino or Hispanic is really important. We also heard that school evaluations can be focused on test scores, and that sometimes takes focus away from their ability to focus on cultural competence, on quality teachers that they want, and doesn't allow them to really incentivize the things they want to spend time on. And then our growing Latinx population in the city demands that we take this on. There was broad agreement. We need to meet the demand of our growing Latino population. I want to briefly highlight what's happening in DCPS, some really great things. First, outreach in Puerto Rico, which is a new initiative that DCPS has been taking on. A bilingual paraprofessional cohort. This is one of the most promising things to me at Columbia Heights Education Campus, where students can study in high school as a grow your own program so that they can become educators after high school. And so this is a small pilot, but we hope to work with DCPS and other stakeholders to grow these kinds of programs and make them available across both sectors. They worked with OSSI to ensure Spanish language licensure exam, which is the first place in the country, I believe, that now is going to allow a Spanish language licensure exam to be accepted to be a licensed teacher. But the needs, they need to make sure that we bridge that gap between training and licensure, and then we have bilingual counselors and social workers, and so that we heard that again and again. I'm going to go through this really quick, and you'll have time in your groups to digest it. What we want is increasing representation of Latinos, principals, policymakers in higher education. We want to remove the barriers. So if you taught for 15 years in Guatemala, You should be able to use those years of experience to get certified to teach in DC, and right now that is very difficult. So that is one of the biggest things we think we can do working with OSSI, working with the Deputy Mayor and others to try to get those certification barriers removed. Increase in fund, grow your own programs, available cross-sector. Our recommendation is for the Deputy Mayor's Office to coordinate a program for both DCPS and charter school students. That they could apply, they could get scholarships to study education and go on to teach if they commit to teach in DC for a period of time, like DCPS is starting to pioneer at Columbia Heights Education Campus. We want to fund additional ELL and dual language positions. Right now, there's a comprehensive staffing model for DCPS that says we need this many English language learner teachers in each school. We want to see that go up and make sure we get more bilingual counselors and social workers. If someone is not only a teacher of color, but they bring cultural competence, they bring language expertise, we want to see that valued in their evaluation as a teacher. And we think that's important to start thinking about in our evaluation systems, not just in DCPS, but in each individual charter school. Birth to 3 is a great new bill that's helping people, early child care providers. We want to see money put behind that and make sure that all DC schools have a starting salary above the living wage, so educators can pay off that debt and afford to stay and live in the city where they teach. We want to make sure we grow dual language programs. There's so much demand for it. We're going to increase that pipeline so we have Latinx teachers. At the same time, we want to make sure that we have those increased programs to meet the demand. And finally, build culturally responsive curriculum in our schools. If we're going to have a growing Latino population, obviously we already have a very large Black population in our schools. Our students of color and all of our students, not just our students of color, deserve a curriculum that is culturally reflective and responsive of them and their experience. So nationally, 2 things. The DREAM Act needs to pass. It's incredibly important for all of our, for so many of our young people, so they can feel the security to stay here. And then federal funding for Teach Grants, which enable students to study and become teachers. So that's a quick overview. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes in small group conversations, and our goal is to learn from you 2 things. The challenges that you have experienced, and all the positives you have experienced from Latinx educators, from whatever perspective you have. So, we have a huge turnout, bigger than we expected, which is a great problem to have. We have more pizza than we didn't have at the beginning, so when we break up, you guys can go get some more food, but this is how we're going to do this. I need everybody who is a facilitator, you can stand up and go to the back of the room for now, and raise your hands. And we probably need all the optional facilitators to be facilitators too. So let me get a count here. Let's see, we have, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to make 12 groups. And here's what I'm going to ask of you. All of you have identified whether you're a teacher, a parent, a policymaker, a student, an advocate, a community member, or a school leader. We want to make sure every group has a diverse group of colors. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to give a general area to each of the people who almost all of them have blue shirts. If not, they should have a name tag. And I ask them to stand in one part of the room. And then I'm going to ask you just to get with a group of people who have different colored dots than you do. And find one of those groups. And they're going to facilitate a conversation for about 40-45 minutes. And we'll come back together to talk about our commitments and what we're all going to do to make this happen. So, can I see the first one, Charnique, can you go to be back here? And then Isa in the middle here. And Francesca, can you come to the front of the room over here? Elizabeth, Koenig, raise your hand. You're going to be in the back there. Together. Okay, so Rhonda and Joselle in the middle of the room here. Valentina towards the front of the room over here. And then Devon over here. So, and then 1, 2, 3 in the front of the room, and then 3 more, back, middle, and front, all the way on the far side of the room. So all you need to do is find someone who's a facilitator and a group of about 10 people with different colored dots. I'm going to ask you to take your chairs with you and make a circle. We'll spend about 45 minutes in conversation, and we'll come back together. Find someone in a blue shirt with a name tag. And make sure your group has a bunch of different colors.